However, it is essential to acknowledge that these remarkable women often navigate a complex landscape fraught with unique challenges. Despite significant progress in gender equality and gender disparities, biases persist in various industries, including our own, the healthcare sector. Female healthcare professionals continue to encounter obstacles that hinder their professional growth and overall job satisfaction. From unequal pay to limited opportunities for leadership positions, from work-life balance struggles to subtle biases in patient interactions. The challenges actually are multifaceted and are far-reaching. The dedicated, I think this delicate balance between caregiving responsibilities at work and the professional environment can be particularly demanding for women, also impacting on their mental and physical well-being. Through the engagement, the objective is to foster open dialogue and understanding. We must work collectively in addressing these obstacles in order to create a more equitable and supportive environment for female healthcare professionals. With that, I would like to encourage all of us to engage actively in this conversation, to listen, to learn, to collaborate. By doing so, we take a step forward in breaking down those barriers and forging a path towards a future where every healthcare professional can thrive. It is now my great pleasure and honor to introduce Summer Board Member and Chairperson of the Women's Wing Committee, Dr. Sharon Harper. Dr. Harper, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for gracing us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The night is here. My name is Sharon Harper, and I'm the chairperson of the Summer Women's Wing Committee. It's an honor to open this Women's Wing in Indaba. Today, we celebrate the formation of Summer's Women's Wing during Women's Month. And this occasion marks a step forward in promoting gender equality and empowering women within the medical profession. We all know what happened on the 9th of August in 1956, where South African women of all colors marched to Pretoria to declare that women will not be left behind in the fight for this country's freedom. The chant, "Wathinta umfazi, wathinta umbokodo," when you strike a woman, you strike a rock, it resonated throughout the corridors of power. And today it still resonates. It says that women are here and we remain a force to be reckoned with. We remember names such as Florence Mkhize, Helen Joseph, Albertina Sisulu, Rahima Musa, Lilian Ngoyi, and many, many others. Many of them now have streets and hospitals and buildings named after them. But is it enough? Is it enough just to put their names on plaques? And I think that we need a fundamental change in the medical profession and also in the broader society that reflects the values that these women stood for. So, as we all know, the medical field is a tapestry of expertise, of dedication and compassion. It's an arena where women have consistently demonstrated their excellence, their resilience as women, and their unwavering commitment. But despite these challenges, despite the many challenges that women are facing in healthcare, we can still remember the likes of Dr. Mary Malahlela, who was the first Black female doctor in South Africa, and even Dr. Jane Watterson, who was the first female registered doctor in South Africa. And with this event, my fellow committee members and I are humbled to be following in their footsteps. So our objectives as the Women's Wing are clearly articulated in our mandate, and it's to advise the board of the South African Medical Association on matters relating to gender-based violence, gender equity, harassment, and bullying in the workplace, things like career advancement for women and other marginalized groups, as well as in particular maternity leave. And we also want to provide input on legislature and rules, or even documents that are related to women and marginalized groups. So the establishment of this body, it signifies SAMA's collective recognition of the contribution made by women doctors, by women researchers, by educators, and by healthcare professionals in South Africa and beyond. And beyond just medical professionals, we're also sensitized to the challenges that our female patients face and other marginalized groups when they seek healthcare. So through a series of initiatives, what we aim to do is we aim to aspire to enhance skills and to facilitate leadership development, and also just encourage a culture of inclusivity. And we believe that when women come together, something amazing happens. So by harnessing our collective wisdom and our experience, we can drive a positive change within the medical community in our society. I would like to encourage everyone on this call to actively participate by engaging and by contributing your ideas. And together we can amplify our voices, we can break barriers, and we can pave the way for a brighter, more equitable future for female medical professionals. I would like to just extend my gratitude to all those who have worked tirelessly to make this event a success and for the formation of the Women's Wing. I would like to thank the SAMA chairperson, the SAMA vice chairperson, the board of directors, the staff at the SAMA head office, and the members of the committee. Your dedication is inspiring, and it speaks volumes about your belief in the potential impact of our collective efforts. Dr. Zanele Bikicha and Prof. Ames Dai, my committee members, we all ask you to join us in this endeavor, and let's embark on this exciting journey with enthusiasm and with determination. Let us be the catalyst for change, the mentors for the next generation, and the champions of a more inclusive and a more progressive medical community. Thank you. Thank you again for giving us your time as we launch the Women's Wing Committee of SAMA. Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. Next up, we'll be having our keynote speaker, Dr. Majak Makgoba. Now, Dr. Majak Makgoba, I first interacted with her, I think it was 3 years ago. And what stood out for me was her confidence and the way she carried herself, especially the way she carried herself in a male-dominated world. Dr. Majake has been in the top of management in both public and private sectors, and she's currently working at the Steve Biko Hospital. She is a specialist in public health. Thank you. She's a specialist in public health and aims to improve the services provided at Steve Biko Hospital. Dr. Majake, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That's quite an introduction. And good evening to all fellow colleagues as well. It really is good to see most of you and to really start engaging, particularly after this very dark period of COVID. I think it really is a good thing that you're looking at various aspects of getting all healthcare workers back into track, looking at things such as mental health, and of course, zooming into other topics that I think are still really very relevant on the agenda of conversations and discussions, but are often pushed aside because they're often seen as controversial or seen as over-politicized. So I really want to congratulate you as well for really going back and looking at where we are as women and how we can actually further bolster the agenda for women and also have more firmer stances of women in various positions, be it in the medical sector, also in the business sector. So I will be putting my video off, but I thought at the beginning, while I talk about my journey very briefly, I'll have my video on. As a young African lady, or relatively young, I think, in your mind, one would always want to be young forever. Growing up in the townships in the 80s, I would say that my journey to where I have come so far really has been one that is quite colorful. And I think the paradox of using the word colorful gives an impression that it has been all beautiful, bright, green colors, warm colors, and so forth. But the irony of it all is actually there were certain times where it didn't really have the hope. It wasn't always as beautiful as one would actually think when you use the word colorful. It's just like a rainbow has various spectrums of colors, the warm ones, the bright ones, the heartwarming ones. You also do have the duller components as well, those that are slightly less pleasant. One has also experienced various episodes of darkness. And I think particularly as somebody who was still growing up in an era where apartheid was still being fought and coming to an end, having Black women become doctors and so forth really wasn't something that was quite common. We did have one or two here and there, but you were exposed to episodes where you would say as a child, I want to become a doctor. And the darkness would be, well, I don't think so. I don't think you can. Perhaps a good social worker, absolutely, but we don't see you becoming a doctor. There were episodes of not being good enough, being told, you can do something else other than what you think you can do. And you're aiming too high, you're unlikely to actually achieve what you're looking for. But I think what I love most about adversity is that it teaches you so many other skills as well, skills of survival, skills of self-affirmation. And certainly the environment that you grow up in doesn't really make you or shape you. But I think the experiences that you actually have, if you can push through them, really do prepare you to go through anything that could be a challenge at a later stage. And so while one looks back and thinks, I actually made it and I managed to become a doctor, and I managed to really get into spaces that I never really intended to get into, which are ones of leadership. I am grateful for some of the major obstacles that I actually had. And this is a message I also want to give, especially to the younger women that are entering into this field, that the obstacles should never be anchors, but rather obstacles are just simply adding on the additional nerve cells to that pressured exposure that you actually have so that you can continue to push yourself even further and break ground. As a doctor, my dream was actually to become an orthopedic surgeon, funny enough. But sometimes life really does throw you into different spaces that you were really not thinking of. And I managed to successfully meander through, I think also with very great mentors around me. And of course, then I landed into leadership. And I certainly also never thought that I would be in the private sector. But I had a colleague who said to me, I think you should give it a try. You have the personality and so forth. And I successfully went through it. But there's still a lot that we need to bring into South Africa. And there's still a role that we have to play within public sector as well. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'm going to now zoom into the journey of leadership for women. And I will then put my video off. So when you look at the journey of, the female medical doctor, and chairperson just basically spoke about it briefly, we have multiple facets. But incredibly, if you look at where we are as women in this kind of journey, you start off in your school years and you go into your middle school years, of course, as a doctor. And by the time you're 26, 28, you then become an intern, get into ComServe. And then boom, you're actually in your 30s, and you start having to go through a lot of dialogues, social dialogues about what do I want afterwards. Your male counterparts quite easily get into the mode of I want to specialize, but you start looking at the biological clock. You start worrying, what's going to happen to me? You start having messages from family about, well, we've seen a lot of successful doctors, but they often end up being childless and marriageless. Not that that actually defines who you are as a woman, but these are the realities that we actually go through. So often we find as women that you go through a perpetual race against time. And a lot of the journey is a dream deferred. You make it to become a doctor, but you didn't make it in time to get married at the right time with other peers in other sectors. You make it to get married in time, but you didn't make it on time to become a specialist. So you're constantly catching up. And I think this also brings out a lot of anxiety, of feeling that you're just not good enough. And it really has a way of actually shattering that perfect picture that we actually see, that we all dream of as little kids, girl children at some point in life. And I think this is also something that we need to start really working hardly on, to say, we can't keep putting more and more goals for girl children to actually achieve, but we need to allow them to actually celebrate one goal at a time and not have them always looking at what is my next, trying to chase constantly a dream, like somebody who's a toddler trying to really reach up to that sweet apricot, but every time you get told, actually, there's one that's even sweeter. And so my message now to young women is, you need to have ways in which you affirm yourself with every single goal that you actually achieve. But also the problem is how we often compare ourselves to each other. And that's also quite it's a dangerous area to actually be in, where you look at what the next person is doing and where they are in their accomplishment. I think we should never really use those accomplishments as benchmarks to where you ought to be, but rather look at those accomplishments as benchmarks towards what life has to offer you as you celebrate your own achievements as well. So I'm trying to move on to the next slide, but I see it's a bit delayed, so apologies for that. So I found that women often have a lot of societal and also work-related pressures. You know, you get the prestige of getting this brilliant career, but instead of being allowed to actually celebrate that, you keep being told, what is your next step? What about family? You know, and if you do have a family, are you being a present enough mother? I know there's a lot of guilt that a lot of women, especially in corporate and also higher positions, a lot of women actually have about whether or not they're being good enough mothers. But also of late, I've also realized a lot of young ladies are actually resigning, even in state sector, because the demand of doctors is never enough for the number of patients in the caseload that we actually have. And so often, if you're an anesthetist who comes in and you've planned to actually be home by 4:30 or 5 o'clock, you find a case will actually start at 4 o'clock when you're supposed to leave, and you're only home at 7, 8 o'clock at night. So these are the things that I would really like Summer to start really advocating for. And I will talk about it at a later stage when we start looking at innovative ways in which we can actually look at how we can feminize the profession of women in the medical sphere itself. And let us not forget that medicine is not an easy discipline to be in at all. Work-related stress is something that all of us are exposed to on a daily basis. It's a high demanding, emotionally taxing space to be in, and it's often one that has very little empathy. We go out and reserve, but we get very little back, and we don't have much room to say we are not coping. And these are the stigmas as well that come from historical structures that we have, even within South Africa and of course globally. Remember, in a patriarchal system with a stiff upper lip culture, you know, to show that you are successful, you actually had to have ways of blocking your emotions and just bearing with it and grinning with it. And what we don't realize is we still have a lot of remnants as well of that stiff upper lip, bear with it, deal with it, but within a male context. And it makes it even more challenging for women to then meander around that type of culture that we need to actually look in, because that creates that not enough syndrome. And it often gives the impression that to exist is to suffer unfair choices. And the reality is you can actually have a way of having a good work-life balance, live in the social spectrum that you want to have, fulfill your ecosystem, and still be a very good doctor. The question is, how do we break those very invisible remnants of systems from many generations ago that still perpetuate environments that become uncomfortable for women? And it is only when we talk about it in this context that we can start zooming into them and looking at how we actually reverse those processes so that many generations to come actually experience the workplace as doctors far differently. So when we look at the context of South Africa and the ratio of men to women, you know, often you hear echoes of, oh, but everything is about the woman and everything is about the girl child, and, you know, less men have got work. It is a perception. Because when you look at the statistics, you can actually still see that there are still more opportunities for men than there are for women. And interestingly enough, if you look deeper into the statistics, there actually are also far more opportunities in lucrative spaces for men than there are for women. I recently went through, a post on Facebook, and somebody was saying, why is it that we see less women in business? And I loved an answer that actually came from a man that said, it's because men are given more opportunities. And there is nothing wrong with men being given opportunities, because often when you talk about gender parity, there is a misnomer that we are trying to advocate for a world that is going to bash men or be anti-men, and that is not the case at all. What we're simply saying is we need to have the agenda of equity. If you have a girl child and a boy child that are equally skilled, why is it that the boy child will then have more of the opportunities purely because of their sex? And this is what we actually need to look into. And so it really is interesting that when you look at where we have come in terms of trying to have various policies that will address making sure that there is equity within various systems, in this case, health system, we haven't really come far if you look at where we are tangibly. So we've had the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women by the United Nations from 1979, Beijing Platform of Action from 1995. Then there was the South African National Policy Framework for Women's Empowerment and Gender Equality from 1996, White Paper for Transformation of Health System in South Africa, 1997, and of course, MDGs and SDGs as well that look at not leaving anybody behind in any shape or form, of course, including women. We had our first female doctor in 1843, Jane Watterson, and our first African woman female doctor in 1916. So when you look at the history of trying to create paper and policies and documenting the fact that you actually have to have recognition of women, it's been there. Yet when you look at, and it's actually quite interesting because I looked at this image of 1956 March, and you can see these white men towering over, of course, to these women of various color who were saying that, look, we demand our rights. It was interesting to actually get into the current big four, as we speak, in the business sector and healthcare, and realize, but you still have the same picture. Here are all these men, and some of these men, mind you, are men that I have engaged with, I have great respect for. And I actually do consider my mentors. So this is not even about being against them. But if you look at Busamed, you have a male CEO. If you look at MediConnect, same. Life, same. Netcare, same. Yet when you look at the policies, they've been dating back forever. So in the 56 years since 1956, the picture actually hasn't really changed. Yes, we walk into the same boardrooms. Yes, we go into the same schools, but the penultimate opportunities are still not yet equal. And this is what we need to ask ourselves. But also what is important is this current generation. You've had the generation of 1956. You've had the generation of 1976. You've had the various generations of different paths. What is this current generation doing to actually change the current status quo of where we are? And we need to ask ourselves, where have we lost our footing? What has truly happened to the cause of women? What happened to trailblazing intellectuals? Where are they? Are we seeing enough of them? What do we see when we get into social media more often? Are we actually seeing young, dynamic women, be it in medical spaces, in aerospace, medicine spaces, in business sector, chartered accountants? Is this what our children are seeing as they're scrolling through social media? What is it about us that is making us fail to unapologetically focus on the cause of women? And what are we going to do to actually start having more of those role models today? And what role are you contributing towards having the next girl child being a global leader? So these are some of my role models that I've actually put on here. And to be quite honest, I like what Sharon says about, how you conduct yourself and so forth and so forth. You become what you see and you become what you thrive to be. And ask yourself, what are young girl children seeing currently? And what are they going to thrive to be? Because that's what they will become. And I'm speaking to a team of people who are already highly educated. Make no mistake, you're highly educated. We live in a society where we are judged by how big our houses are and how big our cars are. But to be quite honest, we all know the old age saying of quality far exceeds quantity. And the fact that you actually contribute towards being an active role player in the workspace, an active, legitimate role player in the economic space, a legitimate role player in the academia space, really does make you somebody who stands out from a quality perspective. But are you using those skills and your core skills and principles of being an astute, quality, ethical individual towards permeating those principles to the people next to you, which will then translate to permeating it within the community as well as again. So we need to refocus the agenda of women by women. And so when you look at the progress in leadership in South African healthcare, particularly, I've spoken about the policies. We've seen academia respond actively to it. Human Resource Health document spoke about how we need to have far more astute, qualified leaders in healthcare. Public health medicine was reestablished, which was previously community health medicine, which looked at more of a global perspective and having a focus as well into giving key structures and key tools towards being a manager in the health sector, but also being one who can actually manage globally. From a national perspective as well. We've got the MBAs in healthcare leadership. But when you look at the workplace daily responsiveness towards actually feminizing the medical domain, yes, of course, we've had the quotas for women. Yes, that box we certainly will tick, where we have seen an increase in percentages. We've seen adjustments in maternity leave and paternity leave as well. But do workplaces really factor in the role that women plays? What happens when you're an executive and your helper or your au pair cannot come and they call in sick? Or your child has been told they're too sick to come to creche, but you've got a major board meeting that you actually have to go present to. Do you have facilities at work where you could actually quickly take your child to continue and be the boss and come back and be the mom? I think if we had to really open up the platform and ask every single individual, chances are we would highly unlikely have anybody confidently say, yes, I work in a place that can actually do that. So we need to work towards having female-centered, child-accommodative work environments. This is what we need to look into. And while I do appreciate the fact that having the academic skills certainly does equip you towards having a more structured approach to everything that you do, within your space that you've actually specialized in, we still need far more than just the academia itself, the academic qualifications. I think those serve as a litmus test, but I see it more as a simulation exercise, because when you're on the ground, the terrain is far more different to what it is when you learn it in theory and here and there shadowing in a practical space. We do not have set formalized skills development, mentoring, and coaching platforms as yet for women. And the reality is, as I indicated before, we still do have threads of the old way of structuring workplaces. And so when you throw in a woman with all the different roles that she actually plays into a space that is not really geared up for her, you really do set her up for failure, especially if she doesn't have a solid support system and a good network as well. And networking also is really something that really is key. This is what has helped me throughout all my different phases as a medical manager, as a general manager, and so forth. But with that as well, you need to be confident enough in yourself to make yourself vulnerable, because when you knock on a door to say, I need help, you need to be comfortable to say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I know I'm equipped for it. Can you help me? And this is something that has taken me through quite successfully. But we all know how the world of medicine doesn't really encourage us to say we are uncertain, because uncertain is often seen as incompetence. And these are also some of the subtle nuances that we actually have to change in our agenda and communication conversations that we have with each other in the medical sphere. On the ground support for the actual experience really is different, and it really is needed. We need that support. You know, when I look at how to manage, leadership has got so many facets to it. If you look in public sector, first of all, when you lead, there's always going to be human dynamics, and there will be good dynamics, there will be bad dynamics, there will be revitalizing energy dynamics, and there will be draining dynamics. These are things that you really can't pick up in a textbook. And these are things you also don't really have time to learn as you go, because sometimes in your quest of learning, you could actually do much more harm and find yourself in a space where you're told, look, you don't know what you're doing, please move, before you could even prove yourself. And that's when you need the support. That's the reality of it, because nobody walks into a space knowing every single thing. So for example, public sector, there's human dynamics, trade union dynamics. It's a very highly regulated environment that can crush the young, enthusiastic trailblazer that wants to change things, because unfortunately you need to toe the line with PFMA, supply chain processes, and so forth. And this is a conversation that I could have with you another day in another space as well. About some of the good policies that are meant to actually ensure that we don't have corruption, we don't have fruitless and wasteful expenditure, but also have a way of really pulling us back in terms of wanting to reach the true outputs and objectives that we want to have. And of course, it's also an under-resourced, high demand, high acuity environment. And so when you come in as a woman with a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old or a 5-year-old, married or unmarried, or, with a partner who's equally busy as well, you already have your own noise. I call it noise. Because often things that make us not to succeed is when you have multiple pockets of things that actually deviate your attention towards fully reaching your goal. I call that noise. And it's good noise, but it's noise that can be destructive towards other things that you need to feed that good noise. If you don't have a solid system or solid network that you can actually tap into, you literally will burn yourself out and fizzle out. Private sector, likewise. Business sector engagements, who learns that in medical school? Nobody does. Investor interest versus patient care outcomes, and of course, it is a very business-focused environment, highly funded, regulated. These day and age, we know how medical aids not only monitor yourselves as practitioners in your own practices, but also they monitor how business of the day is actually run. And you don't want to find a situation where you have a hospital that's been given a bill because your doctors are inefficient and so yourself as one is profit-driven. These are not things that you can learn from a textbook. And these are not things that will actually say you're not coping if you can't do it immediately. But where do you run to? If you are a Zama who's just finished an MBA, managed to be scooped up by one of the big fours, you've relocated because you had to chase your partner, so you don't really know anybody, and you come into a space where all you see are ties and suits, and you're the only person that doesn't quite fit that spectrum. You have to race against having the objectives to prove yourself while trying to understand the environment with little support. So we have to create these networks, and they need to be normalized as well. And they shouldn't be gray. You shouldn't have to scratch around and really think, where can I possibly tap into? It should be normal. It should be normal to find them just like you find other support systems elsewhere. So these are some of the things that we need to look at that really do serve as barriers towards women actually succeeding in the leadership space. So it certainly isn't only about getting women into these roles, but we need to have environments that will accommodate the women. We need to have cultures in the workplace that emphasize feminization. And also a culture of reform. You look at things such, and we need to have things such as mandatory onboarding programs that get both employee and employees ready for the change. Because one thing about being a female leader is there is this subconscious that, we've been in this hospital for 40 years. It hasn't done well financially. We've had Mr. So and Mr. So and Mr. So. What is young little lady actually going to do for us that's going to get it different? And I find that is also something that we often overlook, that you need to have a supportive entry into that work space that will say, we have brought her in because these are actually her credentials. No, she is not here because we needed to meet quota, but she's actually here because she does have the qualifications and so forth. We will be monitoring her progress, but also yourselves as individuals. We will be monitoring your responsiveness towards her and how you're working with her, and it will dictate the functionality of the organization itself. These are not the things that actually happen. You just get in, you get introduced, goodbye, and you will be seen again in the next touch base or next engagement. And we need to start making that a norm, have much more supportive systems, particularly for women when they get in. Why? Because we know historically, most male roles, most of the leadership roles have been male-centered. So it's a subconscious norm that when a man gets in, it's normal for them to be a boss. But when you have a young leader, young female leader, society hasn't quite reached that psychological state of knowing that this person can actually do it until they've spent many nights long after working hours and only shown the good outputs for them to truly believe that they can actually do it. And of course, if you look at other day-to-day operations that still happen, they're very nice. Cultures, of course, they do bring about that brotherliness and, that good engagement and socialization. But really, if you've got a board meeting that finishes at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night, do you have women who really want to sit down and have drinks afterwards, or do they need to run home and go see the kids and attend to the homework and finish cooking meals? The post drinks meeting as well, if you're 3 women with 10 men who are more colleagues, it's not really a family or, an outing per se, psychologically, are they really comfortable, or is it one of those spaces where you need to play along? And what other options do they have? Why can't we have a situation where, okay, so we'll have a drinks corner, but we'll also have a corner for nails touch-up, or something else that will also speak to women to say, it is okay, I'm in the right place, not, I'm not sure, I don't even know the difference between any of these Jamesons, 12, 13, 14, 15 years, I don't know the difference, what am I doing here, And of course, even simple things like team leading sessions just before schools open. It's all well and good, right? We're going to start the year, we're going to get together, we'll see you guys between the 8th and the 11th of January. But now it means kids are going to be saying, hi, mama, how was school, my baby? It was fine virtually. So these are things that we actually need to start really looking at. And unfortunately, when you don't have agendas that actually push that, and you also are very limited in numbers, you end up just giving in. So I love this diagram where you look at the man and his ladder and the woman and her ladder and how they still need to reach the same places. And the answer is, but you both have ladders, what's the problem? The reality is I have to go through too many hoops to actually get to where I want. And yeah, fair enough. People are going to clap for me to say, yeah, you've done it. You've gone up that ladder. And look, you've actually done better than some of your male counterparts that have been here with even more experience. But what we don't look at are the efforts and the impact of, or psychologically, physically, of all the things that that person has actually been through to get them. And so as a parting shot, we say that women often find themselves welcome in spaces, but also are often square pegs in a round hole. There still is a stigma regarding believing in female leaders, and they really have to prove themselves before they can truly be accepted. So it really isn't just about getting them in there, but we need to look at how do we retain them in the roles. We see it in and out. We see it whether it's the public protector, we see it whether it's academia. Women get in. Oh, yes, they definitely get in these days. But do they last? Do they stay? Do they get retained? Or do they often have to leave with a cloud? And what do we do to make sure that our women get in with sun and go through the term, complete the term with the sun, and retire with sun as well? This is what we need to start fighting for. So we really are far from truly reaching the emancipation of women completely, especially in leadership and or other sectors as well. And there really is significance in the Summer Women's Charter, because a lot of women find themselves stumbling. Some go through it with resilience, as I indicated before, where say, you look at these stumbling blocks, you look at how you can actually learn to maneuver through so that you don't fall over. and really have a way of calling it colorful, even though sometimes the colorful picture actually brought about some blisters as well. So as a way forward, I think we need to have ways of really putting feminization of the medical career on the agenda, and even for the girl child who's in medical school, we need to have ways of saying, it is okay, you belong here, you should be here. Policy reviews should be done. We start interrogating. So it's not about just having the outer layer of, right, we need to have so many women in positions, et cetera, but what are the systemic things that are still there that are often overlooked because they accommodate the majority, which would be male, but don't really accommodate the minority that we need to really change, which would be females in this case. So we need to have policies that will advocate for things like job splitting. I really don't see why it is that we're still in a situation where women are opting to become photographers. Female doctors are opting to become photographers, or opting to become, to bake rather, because they couldn't take the long hours. Why can't we have a situation where a doctor could work from 9 until 12 and we split the hours, job splitting? Women shouldn't be made to feel that they need to pull their weight all the time. Oh, so you're a registrar. You said you wanted to become a registrar. So then, okay, you're going to have to see how you finish this thing on record time. Now you're booking your cesarean sections to make sure that you finish whatever it is that you're supposed to do from an academic perspective if you're attending modules, so that when you come back, you're actually still on par with your male counterpart. We need to change that mindset. And it shouldn't be a taboo that you want to become a registrar and have your children at the same time. There isn't anything wrong with it. It's part of nature. Like I showed you at the beginning, by the time you finish being a doctor as a ComServe, you don't really have much time to start off other components of the life that you want to be in. So the issue is not the woman wanting to have the baby. The issue is not the woman who wants to actually go and see their children play soccer. The issue is the system, and that's the systemic problem that I'm talking about, that doesn't accommodate that and makes that abnormal. We have to explore things like buyouts, for different things. If people want to go on sabbaticals, these are radical things that people are thinking, this sounds too radical. It is only when you think radically that you can actually bring about true transformation. And I think certainly as well, what is very sad is I find it is the senior women would be people of my age group that are going to perpetuate this stigma to women who are maybe in their 20s now. We need to stop that culture as well, that bullying culture of, I sucked it up, so you're going to suck it up as well. And really start acknowledging that the roles and the titles that we have, whether you're called a CEO, director, consultant, registrar, so what? Whether you're called a surgeon, so what? You're called that because you've got that skill. We need to stop having ways of actually utilizing that to pin down the person that seems beneath us. These are also some of the things that we really need to start changing, because it is these learned behaviors that we experience in medical training that then go through, and it's very toxic, into the workspace, and we perpetuate them when we start becoming leaders. And we have to actually have classes and also have ways that actually recognize responsibilities at all different levels, but look at those responsibilities of way of nurturing as opposed to those of actually oppressing. And sisterly support really is key. Like I mentioned before, we shouldn't be seeing each other's progresses as I must get a milestone. It really isn't a problem if you don't catch up to that milestone. Celebrate the fact that it's saying, the universe is saying this is a possibility, but it's not putting you under pressure to say you must achieve. What is important is we also need to start being authentic. I find often I get into spaces and, people will say, oh, you need to be harder, or you need to do this. And I say, look, I'm Lehloanola, and I'm not going to change who I am because I'm in this specific environment. Because 10 years from now, I need to be able to live with myself. And if I keep adjusting my personality and myself to every single environment, soon I won't know who I am. And there's nothing wrong with still having soft skills, but being assertive as well. And part of being told, be harder, be firmer, it's again, be something else that you're not, AKA be a man. There's absolutely nothing wrong with still maintaining your femininity, your personality, your softness, because you can still achieve the same thing nonetheless. So I end in saying that I loved this, that says a quote about a woman that says, what's the greatest lesson a woman should learn? And that lesson is that since day one, she's already had everything she needs within herself. It's the world that convinced her she did not. Thank you.
Dr. Majake, that was incredible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You touched on so many things that, sorry, I'm trying to start my video, but you touched on so many things that ring so true for my life. I think the first thing you were talking about was the stress about when to have kids, and I'm like, story of my life, my mom's on my case about kids. The stress about, the stress about the different goals and where you would have seen yourself at certain times. And I think one thing that you were also hinting at was this thing of mentorship, right? And I think I really struggle with that, because as a woman, you want a mentor, but a lot of the places, so even if you look at those CEOs, they're white males, and I struggle still to relate to them. And even as a woman, even feeling safe, right? Because if I'm meeting with this man and after hours, does he really know what my intentions are? Can I really believe what his intentions are? And my hope is that out of this, as you speak about this network, is that I know that, okay, if I'm thinking of a public health, or if I have this problem in management, I know that, okay, there's Dr. Majak that I can speak to, and she can advise me, and I don't have to worry about, the additional stress of, okay, he's a man, and this is what's happening, for example. I think that, even the thing you spoke about I found that, especially in my husband's work, a lot of things happen like on the golf course or with drinks and things like that. And once again, as women, those aren't our spaces. It's very difficult for us to navigate, right? And then even friends who are now, they're able to attain those high goals, or they're able to attain that great position. First of all, it's the imposter syndrome from themselves, feeling like, okay, did I really deserve it? Do I deserve to be here? But it seems like society also has these higher expectations for women. So whereas men may be giving a pass, women, you're supposed to manage the kids, you're supposed to be able to manage your in-laws, manage the firm. I mean, why aren't we doing well, right? And we also put that pressure on ourselves because we think, oh, flip, is it because we're a woman that we got this position? And I think if there's anything that we can do is create a safe space to I don't want to say fail, but to make mistakes and be like, it's okay, like, you're not the first one to make this mistake, like, it'll happen, it'll probably happen again, but you'll get better and you'll learn from it. And that is what I'm hoping comes out from here. Like, thank you. I think, in our brief interactions, I think you're amazing. I think you're brilliant. And you carry yourself with such confidence and such grace. And you, how do I put this? And you do it as a woman, right? And not to say that there's anything wrong with men, but I think sometimes they critique us for, being a bit emotional, being this or being this. And there's a space for all of that, right? I mean, if you're trying to manage women, who best? We have to manage in-laws, we have to manage mothers, we know how to handle people, we know that. And I think, as you said in your last remarks, is that we have everything we need. We have everything we need to succeed wherever it is we want to succeed. Thank you so much. That was amazing. My eyes are open. I'll now hand over to Dr. Bikicha, who will take us through the question and answers.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much.
Dr. Bikicha, over to you. Okay. So in the meantime, while we wait for Dr. Bikicha, I see there were 2 questions in the Q&A section. And I know that you started typing an answer, but perhaps I can read it out and you can help us address it. So the first one was, should we be looking at how to have men take on more of the role in the home and be involved as dads?
Okay, so I guess we're all answering this, right? I'll give my inputs on that. For me, I've never really seen it as it's not a 50-50 situation. And remember, when you decide to get into your path, whatever it is, whether you decide to become a surgical registrar or, a businesswoman that's going to traipse around the world, There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And of course, it would have been a consensual agreement that you would have had with your husband. I think the notion of you need to do more because I'm doing X also for me becomes one of those where we're saying, pull your weight for the man. And I'm not sure if it is necessarily fair. I think what is important is absolutely you need to be partners in making this functional so that you both succeed. Because, I'm making reference specifically to a man because that's what's it's written here, is he has his own dreams as well. He's got his own aspiration. And he's in his own right, he also has every right to go out there and make sure that he achieves his own goals. So what I believe in, and this is what has worked for me personally, is creating systems that will make sure that things still run without having to point fingers of, oh, but I'm studying, I'm doing that exam tomorrow, you're supposed to cook, simple things like, if you're going to be doing that, find ways of having more frozen, cook more, have more frozen things. So he still continues with his things. Create systems where you take kids to your parents or whatever, so that he can still have his boys' nights out on Fridays. But to expect him to completely change how he wants to do certain things as well might not be fair. And I'd love to hear Colleen's part, because of course she might have a different angle to it. But I think, yes, you need to be good partners in it. And sometimes you are blessed to actually have a very amazing partner who really is hands-on. But also what worries me a lot is I hear the word divorce all the time. So I've got a lot of friends who are registrars, and they'll come in and come and have tea in the office, etc. And this word divorce just keeps coming in, and it's the pressures, right? Because we're all human beings. But my thinking is, and of course we'll discuss and unpack and so forth, and fortunately some of them successfully have decided not to go that route. But those who decide not to go that route, I found that when you start changing your expectations of, but he knows I am doing my primaries now, why is he not stepping up, to, oh, well, you know what, I've actually made arrangements with my sister, he can continue doing his own things here and there, he will come and support, it becomes better. So it's a two-way stream. It really is a two-way stream. I hope I've said my bits, but I'd like to hear what others think as well. And I also agree with Cindy Buthelezi that I don't get compulsory overtime. Remember, it's the issue of the supply versus demand. So for now, we have to do compulsory overtime because we don't have enough doctors. Otherwise, we're going to have patients coming in the middle of the night without any doctors. But I think once we start having conversations about, so when I said buy-ins as well, GPs are really struggling out there. How about having doctors who would want to work in government during the day and have GPs who would still want to have their practices during the day, but wouldn't mind working overtime at night? But also how do we give them the correct skills to be able to work on the correct academic level? So, but there's a lot of thinking that I think Summer Women's chapter would also need to look at in that path. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. I think when I think about that question, I think of what Michelle Obama speaks about, and she says that a lot of times in her marriage, it's never been 50-50. So sometimes it's been 30-70, it's been 20-80, 10-90. And the more we kind of chase for that 50-50, you're doing this, you're doing X, I think we're going to be frustrated. And I think that, as women, our power lies within ourselves. Okay, what can I do? What can I change? What can I manage? And then I think, as you said, the expectation from him, if it's a him or a she, whoever your partner is, it becomes different. And I think, they perhaps even have an opportunity to step up because it's willingly, right? And you're not mad if they do, but you're super grateful. So you're not mad if they don't, but you're super grateful if they do. And I think that's perhaps, it needs a mind change from us. But Colleen raises something which also speaks to society at large, right? In terms of what society deems women are, allowed to do, or what women's primary roles are, and how society, for example, family members, how they perceive you as a great academic with no kids, for example. Will they allow it? And how do we change those perspectives within the society? How does my mom-in-law feel that I've ordered takeout for you while you're visiting because I'm not going to come in time? And those things, I think, are also aspects that play into us as women as a whole. And so there's no sense in us just maybe changing the workplace, but home is a big part of your life. Your family is a big part of your life. And so we need to engage the community as a whole. Before I go on, I just want to see, is Dr. Bikicha here yet?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear you. I'll hand over to you for this session. I'm sorry about that. But you can give your thoughts and over to you.
No problem. Dr. Majake, I think you've touched on a lot of key points. I had the privilege to be invited by the Department of Public Service to a Women in Management workshop, and you've touched on some of the key principles that we were looking at when dealing with, what it would take to make sure that we are, empowering women in the workplace. You've touched on issues of policy, because unfortunately, without entrenching certain things in policy, we're always just going to end up being a result of who at that point in time decides to allow what. So we need to make sure that the gender struggle is actually entrenched in policy and that these workplaces are made accommodative. We also looked at the issues of gender mainstreaming, and I'm glad that you understand, that concept, to say that it's not simply in having females there. You need to look at how is the issue of gender actually infused into everything. I mean, at our level, we were looking at how do we support, even through our supply chain management processes, how do we support, and make sure women are emerging business-wise. We can even take it down to something as minor that somebody actually reminded us to say, have you ever looked at your desks that you buy? Have you not noticed that sometimes women, they've got to be conscious of the way they sit because it's open and they don't want, to expose themselves. So they said gender mainstreaming actually goes down to the day-to-day decisions that need to take gender into account. So I think that becomes an important thing as well. Now, another issue that, was raised, and you've brought this up, to say that, yes, there's women, but we also need to look at the quality of what we are saying when we look at figures, particularly in the Department of Health. You will realize that, unfortunately, if you look at health, it's one of those that will give you an artificial sense of having a lot of females in the profession. And unfortunately, you can look at your counterparts like your nursing and all of that. But so that now broadly was actually artificially raising the amount of females, that you were seeing in senior positions, because now your equity targeting now has moved it and has made it only males, because you are seen to have more of your females. But now coming into doctors per se, yes, we're seeing that a whole lot more are accessing specializations, but we need to look into the quality of that. What specializations are women actually making, room and making strides in? Are we only creating dermatologists? Are we only creating psychiatrists? So we need to look at that and say, what are the barriers? Why don't we have neurosurgeons? Why don't we have oncologists? So the quality also matters, and also making sure that you've got women in these places to make the decision. As she touched, look at the CEO space in private, it's male dominated. On what level are they going to understand what needs to be done in policy? So she's touched on a whole lot of issues. And I think that I'm excited for us as this Women's Wing to go forward and chart, an agenda to make sure that I like this term that she's using, feminize medicine, and make sure that it's an enabling environment for women and also, for marginalized communities. And we need to be radical. I mean, let's look at one thing. Why is it that as an intern that you are pregnant, you still are subject to be ripped away from your family, ripped away from your partner? What are we saying about their child, that's being born? We are putting that child and the mother in a position where they don't have a support network. Let's start it at those basic type of levels and say, this in itself is something that is discriminatory to women. They should also be accommodated and understood. We need them to actually, be supported. Let's look at medical school. What do we say about females that end up pregnant? Do they just have to accept that they've lost a semester? Or is there other accommodations now that we've moved into a post-COVID era? Are there other accommodations that could be made to make sure that they're not left behind simply because they're carrying the child? So I'm very excited about the work that we're going to be doing, and as the women's wing of SAMA, and hopefully we will leave our mark, by the end of this, as you said, that will show that we as women have contributed in making sure that the world of medicine is feminized and made an enabling environment for our daughters and our future granddaughters to come. Colleagues, my job here was then to take questions. I'm glad my chairperson has already started. I see that Colleen has indicated that she'd like to discuss further. There is also something from Jay. She is thanking for a very real and relevant presentation. As women in medicine, we need to stop judging each other, but rather support each other depending on the stage of life. The toxic culture of women on women subjugation at senior leadership level, especially mothers of young children, needs to change. Please share your thoughts and practical tips on how to deal with this. So I think she's talking about what we always refer to as her pull her down syndromes, and also that we as women mentoring each other and supporting. I don't know, Dr. Majeke, would you like to just maybe give an input on this?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, Jay, my fellow colleague. I think the nice thing is with yourself as a director, what I've started is I'm actually trying to create a women's forum in Steve Biko. And funny enough, today I had a man, I don't know, people talk so quickly. So today I had a trade unionist come into my office to say, hi, yeah, ne, everything here is about women. It's about women. Even now we're seeing tables and chairs being set up for women. What about us, But I think we need to use our own spaces to start. Unfortunately, you do have the power to do that, Jay, I think, as a director, to have a round table, a feminization round table, feminization of Charlotte round table, I suppose, where you make it normal for people who are under you, and you've got a significant number of people who are under you, to express themselves as women, but also to educate why it is that certain things are the way they are, and have them actually, and it starts small, isn't it? Because we can't change everything overnight. Rome was never built in one day. But for myself, funny enough, just doing ward rounds, I realized a simple thing, and we don't even think about it. I was in casualty, and this young lady is, she's shouting, but shouting in a very small way. I guess she's a young person. And it turns out that actually she got into a room with one of the patients, and this patient actually frisked her. And of course, I immediately said to the patient, you're exactly the type of patient we don't want here. Security come and do a statement, and of course, I think I went overboard. I was like, take pictures. We want to make sure that everybody knows this man is no longer welcome here. And, it just dawned on me that actually, had you not been in there to actually inquire what exactly is going on, it would have been one of those messages that she would have taken home. But we could even start there to say, female doctors know that we need to create a safety agenda, and you have various type of programs that you actually do to start gradually putting in the feminization conversation into whatever is a problem within your workspace. I think that's how we can actually start. But I completely agree with you, and what you're saying speaks to what I have just said now, that we now are often the ones that perpetuate this toxic culture. So you have a young lady who says, I need to quickly pop in, somebody that reports to you, I need to leave, I'm sorry, I was out yesterday, but I need to leave, my child is not sick. And just the way you look at her already says, no, it starts with us and the spaces that we're actually in to change it, but very small, in very small bits. Yeah, it's a pity I can't hear voices. I would have loved to hear Jay's part. Yeah.
Dr. Bikichi, I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now? All right. No, thank you very much. I think that it does speak to what we as women do in terms of the little everyday activities, because that is where it's hidden, this whole pull her down syndrome. And I honestly don't know where we're going to get to the stage where we're of the mentality that another woman's success is also your success. We can't all be contesting, and wanting to emerge as if there's no room for all of us at the top. I think that's something else that we need to spread out and get, that our success and the next woman's success is all of our shared, because it opens doors, it opens barriers for the next lady to actually be able to be there and emerge. So it's very important that we do make the changes within ourselves, and also to make sure that as a woman, one of the problems, I think somebody had mentioned imposter syndrome. When you actually are given the space, use it. Somebody actually said, don't be a space occupying legion. When you're actually fortunate enough to be given a platform, use that space to advocate for the women who are affected by the environment, by the policies, whatever they are, to advocate for women and make sure that their issues are dealt with. So, like I'm saying, look at what Dr. Majeke did, that speaks to us needing to be safe in the work environment as well. She used her position and made sure that she advocates and that another female in her space is not going to feel uncomfortable. And you don't necessarily only need to be in leadership or a manager to achieve that. Let's look at a medical officer that's on call and casualty, and you have a female that comes, she's a victim of gender-based violence. What are you doing to ensure that she's treated with dignity, that she is not forced, to wait and getting secondary trauma, simply because now there's the rest of the things that are more important. You need to be her advocate then at that level. So I think it is important that we do that in our day-to-day interactions, but also make sure that when we are in a space or have the opportunity, let's use that to make sure that we advance women's rights and women's issues. I'm not seeing any more questions. Okay, there's one that's popping up now. This is Dr. Cindy Buthelezi. She says, great talk, doctor, but there is more than enough clinical associates unemployed who can take some of our loads. But we have universities taking 200 students per class. That's third year, instead of doubling intake from first year. We have the HPCSA discontinuing short courses instead of making this course more available. We really can't glamorize this overtime, on-call shift, etc. The department really needs to change. Just because it's been done for ages doesn't make it right. It's toxic. It affects our mental health, and that's not good for our patients. When I'm all moody and tired myself, I won't give maximum service to them. Let's make use of our clinical associates and paramedics. So I think what Cindy is trying to do here is to talk about that gap that we were discussing, the forced overtime. But for me personally, I say, let's take it a step further. Why a woman being forced to engage in this overtime? Is our basic salary actually adequate? Because women are forced into that because they need to supplement, that basic income is not enough. And unfortunately, as much as males find maybe getting the same basic, they don't have the 4 months where they will also be losing a salary simply because they have to bear children. So we need to look at it even broader and say that why are we in that position, and make sure that we're remunerated even at a rate that would not force us into a situation where we decide whether we want to be in the workplace or whether we want to actually be able then to be with our kids. It can't be one or the other. So I think we need to be even more radical. I don't know if you guys want to add on that.
I would love to add on it, Dr. Bikichi, because this also, for me, the clinical associate challenge really speaks to my heart. And I think, Dr. Zukwa, it really is time that we just really get to be informed on why it is that the HPCSA currently has regulations that can't accommodate clinical associates. I think when you look at the Human Resource for Health document, we've been talking about task shifting. And one of the most frustrating points about clinical associates is we've got a cadre of young people who got into, a space to get qualified. A lot of them are children from very disadvantaged communities. And of course, this, is it PCM? I think it's called PCMP degree, was actually one that was supposed to be hope to themselves and their families as well. But here they come out, they're graduates, they've got skills, and they've got nowhere to go. I think somewhere we've missed a beat. And we need to just find out what the challenges are and how they can be looked into. And I think similar to what I discussed about the red tape that we often find in government with the PFMA, SCM, all these challenges, it doesn't only speak to clinical associates, but other cadres of staff as well, where you find suddenly qualifications need to be changed and so forth. So it really needs thorough unpacking with HPCSA and also DPSA as well, but vigorously so, because we are missing out, and we're missing out on the opportunity of really doing this bottoms-up approach that we're advocating for in terms of primary healthcare, task shifting and so forth. And we still have a program, so we're having more and more young people getting in and getting qualified to then find themselves at home. So this is something, or working in spaces that are considered illegal, because it's one of those where you can't get work somewhere, but when you find a way of actually eating and staying alive, because we all know you need money to stay alive, you then being told it's an illegal way of doing it. So I think this is something that we really do need, voices from organizations such as yourself to really look into.
Okay. No, thank you, Dr. Majeke. I think Cindy just added, just to add on to what her statement was, to say that maybe we need to look at, some way to actually progress them to say after a certain amount of time, they then be allowed, to get, a formal MBCHB. I think it's VETS that allows you to, after having done I think it's your BSc, you then can enter medicine, I think at a third year level or something like that. But she's trying to say, maybe we need to look at an alternative model for them. I think that's interesting. It's definitely something that we could take up in terms of, your task shifting. And obviously, you'll have the opposite side in terms of encroachment and all of that, but it is something when you have to look at the bigger picture, especially now that the NHI is approaching. We really need to have a more holistic view of the health system if we are to actually be effective, if we actually are going to have one that enables us to work and still be mentally sound and be able to function. I think COVID showed us, the reality of what can happen with a health system that's under duress. Okay, I'm just checking if we've got more comments. Okay, I'm not seeing any more in the Q&A. Let me just check that I'm not missing anyone. Okay, so I think then that covers exactly, the kind of conversations or questions that our audience had. And for me, I think I'm excited. I think, Dr. Majeke knows me. We've had this coming. We've had this coming for a long time, and I feel that we are finally going to have a space that is going to make sure that women's voices are heard and that the profession actually looks like what we as females would want it to look like, and it needs to be one that is actually able to support us and set us up for success. So I'm excited, and hopefully that this is going to be the body that is going to organize and make sure that we achieve that through our policy work, through, our networking. And I think it's going to be key, for this organization to make sure that we involve other, structures that may necessarily have the same ideologies, so that we also, unite, the voice of females within the space in healthcare, so that we actually then have, more of a voice about what needs to happen in the sector. So I think I am excited, and I'm looking forward to when this actually comes to life. We will obviously be going out and doing the call for nominations, but I think I'm going to give that to the chair to announce about what is going to be the way forward. But I look forward to the work, and I think that this is probably historic for SAMA, and it says something about the fact that they deemed it essential that we actually then uproot a structure like this. And we want to thank the fact that it's actually come out under a male chairperson. You would have thought it would have come out while we had a female leader, but we appreciate the support that our males have shown us. But having said that, I think we as females also mustn't make the mistake of wanting permission from the male gender. I think we need to realize that we cannot wait for them to give power. We need to be out there taking it. I don't know if there's anything our chair would like to say before we then go to the wrap up.
I think quickly, as you alluded to, just to say that, look, as you said, we don't need permission. And I think Dr. Majak has said this earlier, that we need to be radical if we really want to create an impact. And we can't just be doing it bit by bit by bit. I think let's dream big, let's aim high, let's do something different, and let's break barriers. And so nominations, there'll be a call for nominations coming out, I think, within the next week. And I implore anyone who thinks that they want to be a part of this, who wants to be a part of this agenda. We know, there are things about policies that are coming up. There are things about legislature that are coming up. And we want this to be led by women so that it can fit women. So if you are interested, please keep an eye out in your inbox. It will be coming out soon. Come and join us. If that's it from you, Dr. Pikija, perhaps we can hand over to either the CEO, either the chair or the vice chair to do our closing. Okay. So I'll now like to call upon Dr. Mzuka just to do our closing for the evening and thank everyone for joining us, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the Women's Wing. And also, what a speech or engagement from Dr. Majake. I'm really excited about what we were going through. Like you said, you don't really need a permission from any of us. It's a struggle that needs to be tackled. And I believe that we've got the right competent leaders who are going to lead the struggle. And as such, I would like to thank you all, and would, like you said, emphasize that all of us must participate. It must not be seen as something that is going to be driven by one or two individuals, who are sitting there, as board members. But I do think that the structure must come up, from our very own members, and to be involved in the struggle for women, and lead the conversation. And I wouldn't want this to be just a talk shop that does not go anywhere, that does not see anything material. So I would like to thank you all for taking your time. I know you are family members. You need to be preparing dinners, for example, but you really took time to come to this, and I truly appreciate. I was sitting there quietly and listening to this quite insightful presentations and engagements, from the panel. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I wish you all a good evening and a peaceful sleep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.